ॐ भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति.
Namaste to all, and a very warm welcome to our last lecture for this year in the series, Back to the Vedas. Our theme this year was the past, present, and future, and I think everybody would agree with me that it was very informative for the whole year. Now, while we're looking at the issue, for those of you, I'm sure everybody knows me, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kirun Mohan. I'm based in Johannesburg. I am a member of the Arya Prathinidhi Sabha Executive Committee, so we're truly a national organization. I work in the Vedniketan, the Standing Committee of the Arya Samaj South Africa. And the Vedniketan, as you all know, is the institute of the organization that conducts research, attends to publications, publicity, propagation, and delivers these lectures to you, but also graded examinations in Hinduism. I was appointed this year to look at this year's lectures, to moderate them, and to enable us share the findings, the outcomes, and the learnings very widely with everybody. So with today's lecture, the work that we've been doing in Vedniketan for the 100 years comes to an end. In terms of the anniversary, the 100th anniversary, we have covered the 100 years in our lectures, and hopefully today we will begin to say what do we do in the next 100 years, and I'm sure the president of the Arya Samaj and the Centenary Committee will also be looking at what we're going to do in the next 100 years. Now, in the series this year, we have covered the early history as a sub-theme, and we're deeply thankful to a number of people. Some of them are not from the Arya Samaj, but they're good researchers. Professor Ghulam Wahid, who is one of the foremost historians in the country, who gave us valuable material on the early Arya Samaj, the foundations, the founders. Professor Brij Maharaj, who came through and shared his views and research, highlighting the leaders, but also the trailblazers who gave shape and form to the Arya Samaj, both in South Africa and globally, especially in the diaspora. We then had Dr. Shamim Mahabir, who presented to us about the Aryan Benevolent Home, and basically spoke about, the biggest achievement we've had in the 100 years, which was really great. She's also the author of the commemorative book on the 100 years. We had Mr. Hiralal Siunath, who came through and explained to us from his own perspective and observations how the Vedic mandirs were built and gave us a deep overview of how the golden era of the Arya Samaj was when the leaders actually built up things and what caliber of leaders we had, which was really very nice. Then we had Professor Vishwas Satkar, who delivered a lecture on climate change. We had Professor Ashwin Desai, who spoke about the struggle for liberation, looking at the 165 years of Indians being in the country and moving from indenture, struggling to practice their religion and culture to where we are right now. That was very refreshing also. And then we had Nishan Bolton, who covered the South African dilemma on inequalities and identity. Very thought-provoking, lots of good statistics that got us to think about things about where we are in South Africa. And so, from looking at the present, we then had Dr. Rambilas, who came through and paid a tribute to the early Vedic priests, who ensured that we practiced Hinduism and that we ensured that caste moved away. And then we had Yuvesh Sundar, Pandit Yuvesh Sundar, who is our current head of the Vedic Purohit Mandal, who basically did deep research on the Vedic rituals and how they were practiced and enhanced our views of the early Vedic priests and why we should actually, ensure that we continue to look at them. Of course, in that early Vedic priests, the last two lectures, we looked from Pandit Bhavani Dayal through to Pandit Nardev and to the priests that we have even today, which is really nice. Now, from all these lectures we've had this year, the value and importance of Vedic priests was highlighted. Whether it was Pandit Bhavani Dayal, who later became Swami Bhavani Dayal, the first Swami from South Africa or of South African origin, to Pandit Nardev, who came in and really gave a blast to South Africa and really put us on a different footing. And then, we looked at the early leaders and the golden era of the Arya Samaj from 1950 to around 1985, 1990. Today, our focus is going to be on the future. And to do this, we have our current president, who needs no introduction to you. He's Pandit Kirun Satgoor, who is also the president of the Vedram Sabha in Pietermaritzburg. And his topic is professionalizing the Vedic priesthood. So over to you, Kiran Bhai.
Thank you, Karuna. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. But I can see that, and on listening to what you are saying about the past presentations, we've covered a very wide variety of topics. But the latter part, I think, from Dr. Rambilas's lecture coming right down to today's lecture, has been focusing on the priesthood in South Africa. So I must say from the outset that I have also touched a little bit on the historical perspective, but I have also I've also used some of my information from the chaplaincy so that we can compare and see how we can take the Vedic priesthood, the Vedic Purohit Mandal, and the role of the priests that we have, and how do we take them forward into a new era, a modern era of activities. And as you know that we are celebrating our 100 years of the foundation of the Arya Samaj in South Africa, we are also we had the opportunity to even go to India and be part of the 150-year Mahasammelan, which also was the celebration of Arya Samaj International. So when one looks at the history and the background that we come from, it is one of sacrifice, it is one of commitment, it is one of exposing people to the pure knowledge, the Vedic knowledge. And I think the greatest teacher that we can always reflect on is Swami Dayanand Saraswati, the founder of the Arya Samaj. He being one of the greatest priests that we have ever had, being a Swami, but also being a student of the Vedas, he was able to introduce us to this whole process and method, the methodology behind the sanskar vidhi, and also the different performance of these wonderful sacraments. Coming back to the South African diaspora, the priesthood has always been at the forefront, and I constantly say that the priests are the foot soldiers of the Arya Samaj. They are the face, and they are the persons that are out there in the forefront, working with the community, directing their energies towards upliftment of society, upliftment of the community, families, giving a lot of coverage to grieving families, supporting them, and at hospitals. And we are one of the unique organizations in the world, the Arya Samaj, where we have been able to even give a lot of support and ministry. The word ministry I will use quite a bit, to the correctional services, where we work in the prison environment. And there again, the professionalism that came out and comes out in dealing with our incarcerated people that need help. Again, in South Africa, and I can say this very comfortably and safely, that we're also responsible, the Arya Samaj South Africa, in serving in the National Defense Force. We still do, in an advisory capacity. And the reason I say this is because we have been able to make a huge footprint in the Defense Force, especially with the Hindu members, since 1994, and since change in this country. We've been able to make a huge impact on the soldiers and the people on the ground in the military environment, giving them that spiritual and giving them that professional service. Right up until this year, Diwali was celebrated at the Air Force Base, and the chaplain or the priest, Somalin, who comes from the Tamil fraternity, but he also is a student of the Vedas. Whilst I was there for so many years, we made sure that our rites, rituals, and our practices were always considered. So this gives us an opportunity to look at the different environments that we have been exposed to, because, as I said, we are unique in the sense that the Americans have chaplains, and they do have one Hindu chaplain. The Australians were still thinking about it, and when we look at the Indian diaspora, and that is why I'm going to them last, they do not have spiritual support or priests that are out there in the defense force giving support. I may be open to correction, but I've interacted with them at many levels, and they were quite amazed with what we are doing here in South Africa. And so today, and taking up from the different topics that we have heard, listened, and been exposed to. As I said, that the priesthood and the priests are our foot soldiers. They are out there in the front line, meeting with community, and also they are performing the different sacraments and sanskars. So I would like to just go into the share mechanism, Karuna, so that I can start with my PowerPoint. Is that okay?
You get it under more. Go ahead, Kirun bhai.
Why is my screen sharing paused?
Okay. That's it. Good.
Okay. So the aim of my presentation today is to focus on, to raise thought-provoking questions on the practice of religious ministry and the notion of defining the role of a priest in pursuit of a professional, quality-driven priest service. I have a graphic representation of of a pyramid, which gives us the 4 C's, and this is a strategic focus area which I have used in the military environment, but it applies to us even in a civilian environment. When one looks at this picture that we have before us, on the left-hand side, you can see that we have capabilities, character, care, and competence. These are strategic focus areas. And on the right-hand side, you look at capabilities that goes with critical expansion of structure and budget, proper matching and placing expanded reserves, and utilization of whatever we have, our resources. When we look at one of the most important C's, that is character, and that provides an ethical example, and anybody that's in the ministry or in the priesthood, your character is something that one looks at. And important things that go with character is your calling, your maturity, your discipline, and also you become a servant. You're a servant of the people that you serve. The third C is care. So every priest should have an empathetic embrace. We should have a caring disposition. We should be considerate. We should be compassionate, present at all times. When there's a need, you must be visible and accessible. And the final one is competence, which focuses on excellence and effectiveness. Anybody that is competent, you will find that you have high standards that you work towards. And so in that competence, you find that you give current, effective ministry and support to your people from your satsang group, from your affiliation, from your community, and for those that you are there for. So when you look at the 4 C's, those should be the basis of who you are as a minister, as a priest, as a Vedic priest, or a spiritual leader. Because when the 4 C's come into play, capability, your character, your care for your community, and your competence creates for you what we call a circle of credibility. You then are seen as a person that is outstanding and to serve your community. For quality-driven ministry to be realized, the following way identifies as critical. One, the character of a Vedic Purohit. Two, it says that if you take care of your character, your reputation will take care of itself. And be more concerned with your character than your reputation, because your character is what you really are. And while your reputation is merely what others think you are, be more concerned about or what your character than your reputation, because your character is what you really are. And that is very classic, because people will always say, I saw Pandit X, I saw Pandit Y. It's amazing. Recently, we had a controversial situation in Pietermaritzburg, and I'm not going to name names, but a pandit was seen in the casino, and not to eat, but he was doing things that a normal citizen would do for entertainment. So, but it spread like wildfire. So the character, if you take care of your character, your reputation will take care of itself. For quality-driven priest work to be realized, the following attributes were identified as a critical determining factor. One, you have to be caring, and that caring capacity of a Vedic priest must always be there. You have to be competent, and with competence goes professionalism. You have to be the capabilities, with you taking into consideration the caring capacity that you have, the competence that you have, you take that into the Vedic Purohit Mandal. And these build and enhance the strategic focus areas of serving the Vedic Purohit Mandal. So there's two elements that you need to look at in your professional approach, is to be caring and you need to be competent. And the other one is character. So when we say, what is your calling? What is a calling? A calling is something that comes from within, where it's part of you, where you are willing to make those sacrifices. It is something that you enjoy doing. That is your calling. And you will find that when you identify that you have that strong, positive need within yourself to serve and to be there for your people, that is the calling. With that goes maturity, discipline, and servanthood. When we talk about servanthood, it is a fundamental cornerstone of a professional person, because you, especially as a priest, you are a servant of God, and you're also a servant to your community. You're a servant to your samaj. You're a servant to your organization. But more so, you're a servant to your general sabha or samaj that you are serving. So in the context of reading the signs of the times, the focus is still on the character of the priest. The Vedic Purohit Mandal has addressed the notion of a very important facet which goes with professionalism, and that is discipline, as important defining attribute for the strategic focus and the character of a Vedic priest. Discipline is something that we should not waver on. Discipline is something that should be a guiding principle to yourself as a priest, because when you are a disciplined priest, then you will find that no matter what, you become as strong as a rock. The focus on maturity of a priest is an important quality of the character of a Vedic priest. When we talk about maturity, you can be a young person and you can be very mature. That does not mean that you are not mature. But I think when we look at the way our society is structured, that as you grow older and as you grow into your community and you grow into your calling, that maturity plays a key role in guiding you and your character as a Vedic priest. When we look at maturity, we need to look at it as physical, as an emotional, spiritual, and intellectual and social reality. When we talk about physical, your physical maturity must be not just physical in the sense that you must be mobile, you must be active, you must be proactive. That is important. You must be able to lead from the front, you must be able to guide. When we talk about emotional and your maturity comes into play, you must be able to, your professionalism should guide you, that you must be able to look at things from all angles. You need to look at things from different perspectives. You cannot become emotionally involved where you just respond without thinking. The other part of it is that spiritual element in you has to always be there, because you are a spiritual guide to the people on the ground. You need to know your sanskars. You need to know your scripture. You need to know what you are standing for and the principles that you are standing for. So your mental and your intellectual capacity must always be there to guide you as a mature person. Your social reality is that you are there with your people on the ground all the time. You are 24/7 as a support to the people on the ground. A good blending of physical, emotional, spiritual, intellectual, and social maturity is what defines a matured individual. Why this theme, professionalizing the Vedic priesthood, is a subject of all-time relevance for effective priest work. It is relevant because our temples, our family, and our samajas need leadership that can take them to different levels. And within this theme is the notion, as I said, of maturity as a critical defining attribute of what becomes an effective or defective priest. The ability to read signs of the times provides the priest to be both reactive and proactive, especially in the way you minister to your people in your satsangs, in your affiliation, at your groups, at your classes. It is important that you are able to be fine-tuned as to what's happening in our community at this very moment. As we sit here today, there is 16 days of activism that is taking place, will be taking place. You have gender-based violence. These are community issues. Then you have issues dealing with the youngsters. You have issues dealing with drugs. You have issues dealing with the aged. So you need to read what is happening around you and how you can take your professionalism, your maturity, and make it effective in the way you perform in your community and as a priest. It's not just doing rites and rituals. You have to think out of the box, as they say. I want to just move from what we just said to a bit of history, because what we have just spoken about comes from a very strong basis and comes from a strong historical perspective of the Arya Samaj. When we look at our first priests in South Africa, the continuity of indentured Indian communities in South Africa began with the early arrival of Vedic practitioners between 1860 and 1911. So these individuals, though not priests, remember, a lot of them were not literate, some of them were illiterate, but most of them came from regions where they practiced certain ways of worship. So They preserve their cultural and religious identity by performing their havans, by performing their rites and rituals. We are not here to criticize, but people came as indentured labor, they came as slaves, as in inverted commas, to work the land of this country. But at the same time, they needed to have some sort of personal spiritual comfort. They needed to be recognized. So this is where the sanskars, the communal gatherings under harsh social and economic conditions, they built the foundation for a resilient spiritual culture that would later grow into our organizations that we are part of. I want to focus on one such priest, Pandit Shivratan. He was also a very professional priest. He was South Africa's early homegrown Vedic priest. Please don't focus on those dates because I think it may not be correct. So Pandit Shivratan was born in South Africa, representing one of the earliest. He was a local son of the soil to pursue priestly training. His story is one of courage and integrity. Remember, we were in a society where we did not have easy access to education, schools, and colleges. And if I recall my conversation with members of his family, he actually went out there and he started seeking to find out more about our dharma and the Vedic way of life. And then he even enrolled to study through correspondence with one of the colleges from India. And despite being trained and committed to Vedic service, he was ostracized by caste-conscious segments of the community. Remember, not only studying as a priest, he also worked in the leather industry at that time. Maritzburg is where he was born. The leather industry was at its peak, and so if you worked with leather, it was also regarded as somebody or someone with an inferior caste. And he was resisted by the so-called Puranic sector, who he was not accepted, he was ostracized, and he was resisted as a South African-born priest. He refused to yield to these discriminatory attitudes, standing firmly on the Vedic knowledge that he acquired and the Vedic truth. His persistence established an important precedent that the Vedic priesthood is defined by knowledge, not just ritualism, ethics, and service. So there again, there are three important things that makes one a professional: knowledge, ethics, and service, but not caste, not lineage, or your birthplace. So Pandit Shivratan's legacy affirmed that South Africa could cultivate its own fully qualified, morally grounded priests of international standard. The second person that I would like to focus on was Swami Bhavani Dayal, a social reformer and institutional spiritual leader. Not only being the first president of the Natal Indian Congress, he was also the president of Arya Samaj or Arya Pratini Sabha, South Africa. Swami Bhavani Dayal was a revered spiritual teacher, a reformer, strengthened the intellectual and ethical base of the Arya Samaj in South Africa. He also was born in South Africa, in Gauteng, in Johannesburg at that time. And what were some of his key contributions towards Arya Samaj, but also for us to take a leaf out of his life in terms of professionalism? He was championing education. He made sure that propagation of Hindi and the sanskars and the Vedic way of life was pursued. Equality. He was also a champion fighting through the Natal Indian Congress for equality of mankind and humankind. There again, because of the Vedic knowledge, Swami Dayanand and also being involved in the political arena, he also worked towards women's upliftment. And that itself tells you that the Arya Samaj was at the forefront, not just now, but for many years, working towards recognition and equality of women. But the important ideology that came out that he was anti-caste, which is very important because our society was not highly educated, but people used the caste basis to differentiate and discriminate. He was a leading national dharmic instructor. So, by his actions and his leadership, he was able to produce accessible teachings. I'm open to correction, but I believe he was also one of those that was responsible for producing our Vedic prayer book and also exposing people to the sanskar system. He was also reinforcing that a priest must also be a community educator, a reformer, and an example of moral discipline. Here again, when we talk about professionalism and when we see and read about Swami Bhavani Dayal, we see and we also read about, because even if you see a picture of him, he exuded that professionalism. That was so great about him. His influence helped shift the priesthood from ritual performance to social responsibility and spiritual leadership, because he walked the talk. He was an NIC leader, but he was also an Arya Samaj leader. He was also a performer of sanskars and sacraments. So he was a living example at that time of what a true professional priest was. Then we come to Pandit Nardev Vedalankar, who is the architect of the modern South African Vedic priesthood. Pandit Nardev Vedalankar professionalized the Vedic priesthood in South Africa more than any other figure. We've had Swami Shankaranand that came, Bhai Parmanand that came, and various other leaders that came. Swami Shankaranand was a Swami. He obviously came from a background of the priesthood, knowing the sacraments and knowing the sanskar system. But Pandit Nardev Vedalankar immigrated from India and landed in South Africa. And in the space of time that he was here in South Africa, he made a huge shift in the thinking and the direction of the Arya Samaj in South Africa. And when we look at his legacy, it includes the formation of the Vedic Purohit Mandal, where examination-based qualifications and formal priest training took place. I could remember as a young man and a young boy accompanying my own grandfather, Pandit Dukran, who used to come to Durban and go to Lawn Street and sit with Panditji for training and also for further information. He standardized the Sanskar manuals and the South African adapted liturgies. That means he was able to simplify the way the Sanskars were set out, and also in terms of the way we spoke out at ceremonies, and also using the knowledge that we gained from his books. Training a new generation of priests rooted in knowledge, discipline, and community ethics. Now, when you look at Pandit Nardev, he was also, as we said, a professional rooted in knowledge, discipline, and community ethics. Then you look at the creation of the Ved Niketan, because the Ved Niketan was the wing where he concentrated with people like Dr. Rambilas, who helped him to interpret and to pen certain thoughts of his, with various other, Mr. Chute, and various other people that worked with him closely to pen and to write from the elementary books right up to Dharma Prabhakar, which is quite a high standard in terms of our study. And it takes you from a simplistic approach right to a diploma or higher diploma level. Now, this is important because we do have the School of Vedic Studies, but I'll come back to that. But whilst I'm on Panditji, I would like to also suggest to add to this professionalism, it's important that our current priests and new priests in training, focus on the Vedniketan medium of Vedic studies also, because it can bring you, it builds you up, and it also exposes you to the Vedic knowledge. He was also responsible for emphasizing that the Arya Samaj principle that priesthood, he remains is a important facet of our Arya Samaj. The principle that priesthood is a leadership, as I said, they are the foot soldiers, they are the ones that are out there propagating, and they are the face of the Arya Samaj. He remains at the central architect of today's structured priestly framework. When Panditji started Vedic Purohit Mandal, obviously over a period of time, like any educational institute, there will always be adaptations, there will always be changes, there will always be new introduction to new knowledge and new information. But we need to acknowledge that he remains the central architect of the priestly training in South Africa. The School of Vedic Studies and / Vedic Purohit Mandal, which is the formal training for the future. The introduction of the School of Vedic Studies, now evolving into a globally accessible, and is giving our Vedic Purohit Mandal representation as the newest chapter in priestly professionalization. I would like to just proudly say that we were at the Sammelan in India. We went with a small team accompanied by Dr. Rambilas, Pandit Reshma, Pandit Rita, Swami Vedanand. And whilst we were there, you will find that when one had to compare with the Western society, leaving Indian diaspora, but if we had to compare with the Americas, we had to compare with the Latin Americans, if we had to compare with the West Indians, the Australians, the New Zealanders, and other countries, including Africa, Kenya, and South Africa, our structured School of Vedic Studies, the Vedic Purohit Mandal, is way ahead than most of these countries. And we should be proud that from the time the Vedic Purohit Mandal started, with the training wing for training of priests, which I can recall was Pandit Jagmohan Singh in Pietermaritzburg. We had Pandit Bukhan in Pietermaritzburg. When you come to Durban, there was Pandit Bhagwandin, recent, but well, not so recent, Pandit Bihadar, and many others. And what about the most important thing is that our Vedic Purohit Mandal turned out professional priests in the women's sector. We were the first in the world to actually qualify female priests. And this was an eye-opener. Even in India, they may have it now, I'm open to correction, but South Africa was the first. And we hold that, and we should be proud that we promoted and we provided this country with professional female priests. Pandita Nanakchan, Pandita Hanuman, and many others that followed after her, the different sets of ladies that qualified. And when we look at even the number of people or the number of priests on our Vedic Purohit Mandal register, the women outweigh the men, because the women are opting to study the Vedic knowledge. They are opting to study the sanskar system. they are opting to go out there and work in our society and our community. And I must say that we have a women priests, we have so many of our priests that don the blue gown, and they are standing there tall and professional, and they are doing their work in a manner that one cannot actually point a finger at them. Yes, you know, in any situation, you would have one person that may not step up to the plate, as they say. But I think overall, when you look at the professionalism that we have, that is from our priests that are out there serving our community, we actually need to pay them an honor and don our caps for them. So let's come back to the School of Vedic Studies, because this was the transition from the old style of training when Pandit Bihadar and many before him, Pandit Bihadar was the last one, and Dr. Hemraj, were able to put together a formal training program which was run in Carlisle Street, which obviously came through from Panditji Nardev's training manuals. And so again, we look at the change of times and the evolving of the changing and change of times. And so the School of Vedic Studies was given birth in Carlisle Street, and I remember that was around 2006 and 7. When the School of Vedic Studies was coined and thought of, we said that they will change it into a, now not 2007, I'm open to correction, but I think it was a bit after that. So when the School of Vedic Studies was structured, it was brought to be par with any educational institution that would have a structured training program. And so the School of Vedic Studies, which was a face-to-face, where people used to attend lectures, was broken down into a 6-month modular training program. And the Sanskrit foundations were considered: the theory and practice of yajna, the 16 sanskars, the Vedic ethics and pastoral conduct, public speaking and community facilitation, leadership and counseling, and obviously the most important part of the School of Vedic Studies, which is still being researched, is the practical part of the curriculum. And so the Vedic School of Vedic Studies is doing a splendid piece of work. It is incorporating the past and also at the same time looking at turning out professional priests, but on par with what the needs of our society are required. And the priests that are coming out are servicing the needs at different levels. You may have some priests that are working purely in a technological atmosphere, in or working on the ground. You may have some priests that are working in social upliftment programs. You may have some priests that are out there working in different arms of service. So the priests that are coming out now are also being trained to be adaptable and also professional in their approach in terms of their calling and to the areas of concern that they are working in. So the central teaching of that Vedic priesthood is a calling, as I said, and that calling leads you to a path of seva, which is selfless service. And when you give your best without looking at the end rewards for yourself and for your ego and for your greatness, then you are doing nishkama karma. It also makes you grow into what we say, that inner discipline that you need to have. It goes with your character, it goes with the way you perform, and also the role that you play as a community leader. People look up to you as a professional. Moral purity is important because you are also the face, the eyes, and you are a representative of your national organization that you belong to. So your morality, the way you carry yourself, that professional manner in which you deal with people that are in grief, marriage, people that are having social issues, that comes to play. And the last thing is that you should be there to and add a commitment at all times as a priest to uplift your society. Spiritual leadership after qualification graduates progress into, and you will find that that is what's happening. From our pool of priests, we are looking at community spiritual leaders. Community spiritual leaders that are now tackling old age. Community spiritual leaders that are dealing in social reform programs. Community spiritual leaders that are working with people in hospitals and various other sectors. We are finding that the youth are a challenge, and this is one of the areas of concern that we need to look at in terms of adaptability. How do we now turn this professional priesthood into working with the youngsters on the ground? We cannot treat them like an adult in some instances, as mature adults. Some of them are mature even as youngsters. But we need to start creating an atmosphere of compassion, an atmosphere of friendship, an atmosphere that wins the young people over to us. We must be able to sit down with them and talk to them about what their youth challenges that they are facing. The professional priest must be able to be adaptable. And this is where we need to start looking at how we can become youth mentors. Counselors, yes, we are not psychologists, we are not psychiatrists, but like any other priest in any other faith group, we in the Vedic tradition have now introduced counseling, where you can sit with your premarital couple, post-marital couples, and we can sit with people that are having challenges in their lives. So counseling is something that we need to also look at, where we can become more and more professional, and we need to be doing more courses so that we can then become more professional and become more user-friendly to our societal needs. We are educators, and that's an ongoing process. Whether you're performing a sanskar, whether you're performing a ordinary havan, it is your beholden duty when you sit there, before you start your function, you need to level some form of education to your participants. That is the most important thing. Yes, we're going into another era which is called interfaith dialogue, and we cannot stand alone, especially if you're looking at being part of a society. As we say, no man is an isle, but we are all part of the main. If we think that we can be on our own, then we will perish as fools. Interfaith dialogue is important. We need to speak to other faith groups. We need to make them aware about our identity, make them aware of what our functions are, make them aware of what our work is towards uplifting society. And maybe we can become a powerful force where when we speak a common language in the interfaith dialogue. And the last one is Arya Samaj organizational leadership roles. We are wanting in many ways. We are wanting in manpower. We are wanting in skilled manpower. We are wanting in membership in many cases. And I'm not saying this from a negative point of view, and I'm saying this because it's a reality. We find that there's a huge migration of our youth and young people to different parts of the world. We are saddled with a lot of old people, mature, but still willing to help. But we are finding that we are getting thin on the ground with organizational leadership. So this again, we need to start looking at developing and we need to develop people. And important word here is part of our professionalism as priests. We need to start looking at creating succession planning and getting involved in our samajas. The work integrates Vedic knowledge with social outreach, reform, and modern community needs. Conclusion, I would like to just say that a professional, ethical, service-driven priesthood, the evolution of the South African Vedic priesthood from early indentured era practitioners to today's formally trained leaders, rests on courage. We must not be afraid. It rests on knowledge, which is 24/7. You got to be reading, you got to be delving into your knowledge and getting to know who you are and getting to know what you stand for. Knowledge is a very strong weapon. Ethics is something that we need to always say, that we will always lead a righteous, a straightforward life and not questionable. Vision, all of us need to look beyond the current, because it is dependent on you as a professional priest to say that I am presently here doing a funeral every week, but from here, what else do I do? Become a visionary, become something else. Work with families, work with the youth, work with your community. That is important. The insistence on service before status, important. Ego is one of the biggest things that is bloated, and people stand and say, oh man, I am the greatest. Muhammad Ali was the greatest and he fell. But service before status, that is important. Dharma before livelihood. Your way of life. Sometimes we make sacrifices, and when we want to refer to this, then we refer to the great souls like Swami Dayanand. We refer to the great souls like Swami Vivekananda. These are the people that made great sacrifices. They didn't worry about amassing millions, but it was about performing and enhancing the dharma. That came first. Knowledge before ritual, it's important, but sometimes when we become too knowledgeable, too much in the head, as they say, it can become disastrous. So your knowledge should be balanced and not too much of ritualism, which we find in the other sectors of Hinduism. Ensures that the future priests become guardians of truth. We become educators of society, and we become advocates of equality. We are ambassadors of Vedic humanism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirun Bhai. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask and beg for your indulgence, obviously because this was wrapping up the last 2 lectures, but also taking that very interesting platform that we built up in the year series on, where do we take the Arya Samaj to? I allowed Kirun Bhai to continue, because I think if there's anything we heard from all the lectures that we had, that the foundations of the Arya Samaj in South Africa came from people who were very spiritual, who led the organization, but we're also very rooted in reality. We're also very rooted in society. And we're on the brink now of going into the next 50, 100 years. And, we have these slogans that our priests are our foot soldiers, but we do know we have a new reality today. And so, as Pandit Judy says, 1 hour is too little for this. Okay, let's open it up. Anybody wants to say anything, please unmute and go ahead. Prisha, you don't have any more questions? It would be very nice if we could convince you to become a priest.
No questions as such, but I think, the whole thing with moving forward is if you, especially trying to get younger people involved, because I think what's quite important is that first of all, we need to, stop selling it as, I'm just using that word very loosely here, as a Hindu concept, because it's not. If you look at Vedism, it's knowledge in its purest form. And when you look at social media, for instance, it's such an easy way to get the Arya Samaj like in people's faces, and not, there's so many projects that you're involved with, so a small video clip of putting things together with these amazing mantras, audio clips, to go with that. And it's just one way of really putting it in front of people and going, this is like really being bold about it. And because the knowledge that we have is something that we should really be proud of. It's ancient, but it's also very current. And I think that's a really important step that we need to take.
Thank you, Prisha. Is there anybody else who would like to say something? Okay, so I did beg for the indulgence of everybody. And I think you aware that we said we'd moderate all these lectures so that we can present what we are going to be doing in the future. And I just want to share a presentation with you, a very brief presentation with you that actually covers the content or the actual reality of the entire set of lectures that we had for the year. And Kirun, you're seeing my screen, eh?
Yes, yes, yes.
Good. So we looked at the past, present, and future. We looked at the 100 years of the Arya Samaj from 1925 to 2025. And, we know that 1925 was when the Arya Samaj was founded, but 1860s when the arrival of a number of Indians came in under colonization. Majority of them were Tamil speaking, and there was massive conversion that took place under colonization. We know that Arya Samaj missionaries came in, they brought new ideas, they promoted Hindu unity, the rejection of the caste system, and social movements. And today, Kirun Bhai gave a lot of real history about that. By the way, Kirun Bhai, Joey is on, and Joey is Pandit Shivratan's granddaughter. And you also have Pandit Nardev's daughter on, Jyoti Ben is on today. So, I think we've brought the circle together. But in terms of uniting the Hindu community, we know that the Arya Samaj set up Mahasabha. And so it's important that in going into the future, we continue to support the need for Hindu unity within our country. Of course, our locals established groundbreaking work they did. They established the Aryanath Ashram and many other organizations that actually do things. The Aryan Benevolent Home today has a spread across the country. And very recently, the Aryanath Ashram that was set up in Maritzburg has relocated, and this past weekend, they had their grand opening. So we know that we have common bonds and common fates and similar histories with people who were under indenture across the world. They had the same struggles. But within South Africa, we built up buildings and properties. The first property that was ever bought was in York Road in Pietermaritzburg, and it was named the Vedic Ashram, and Swami Shankaranand lived there, but did a lot of the work he did in Durban. Very much like Kirun Bhai does today. He lives in Maritzburg, but does a lot of work in Durban. Basically, in Durban in 1921, on the 1st of May, on Workers' Day, basically the AYS launched the Aryan Benevolent Home, the Arya Nath Ashram. A lot of our Arya Samaj organizations, because children were not getting educated and education was expensive, and the then government didn't provide for education, joined hands with other people and built up schools. One of the places where the Arya Samaj and all other Hindus got together and built up the school was in Westville, where Bhai Rambilas had the Hindu school in recent times. So, you know, there are a number of those examples. Our first Vedic mandir that we've ever had was opened only on the 24th of August 1958. Arya Samaj people were very modern. They used the property for income generation. Even in Kalal Street, we had built a whole lot. We had flats in Pietermaritzburg. We have flats. So, you know, we've got a sound and a good foundation. So, you know, the Ved Mandir in Durban, for example, was only completed in 1975. 50 years after the Arya Samaj was there, because mandirs and ritual wasn't so important as caring for people. The Arya Samaj, like everybody else in South Africa, was affected by the group areas, but they reconstituted, they rebuilt. Cato Manor property, for example, was highlighted in one of our sessions that we had. We know that this spirit of caring was very important. And right from 1921, when the Aryan Benevolent Home was set up, it was caring for people regardless of caste, regardless of race. When Aryan Benevolent Home was affected with group areas, it moved over to Chatsworth. A beautiful national footprint has been built. It's now an independent identity. It's even embraced by the local community, the Chatsworth community. And that's the work of the Arya Samaj, which is why during the 150-year celebration of the Arya Samaj in India, the Aryan Benevolent Home was recognized. So when we formed the APS in February 1925, what do we need to do about the past? Kirun Bhai, as president, I am raising that we need to fill in the gaps on the biographies of past leaders and the priests of the Arya Samaj, or the future generations will not have this information. We need to scan all the historical records of the Arya Samaj so that we can actually do what is being said, that we need to get onto social media and we need to keep up in the digital world. We need to develop a historical archives at our headquarters. So we need to be able to say our past from 1860 to 1925. We have that history in place. We have the stories of how people struggled and got in. That's the early history. But we need to also take the 100-year history and make sure it is available for the next 100 years. I think this is a major thing that has come out of the series of Back to the Vedas that focused on the 100 years. Okay, so that was the past. In terms of the present, we focused on the climate justice program, about closing the gap on inequalities and identity. And I think one of the things is we need to become more active in the climate justice movement, which we are signatories to, we are participants in. We need to begin to link with local organizations and mobilize our affiliates to act in the communities on climate issues. We need to begin to look at Project Tripti. Project Tripti exists, beautiful program that looks at water scarcity. It's groundbreaking in how it's doing things. We need to begin to look at the next level up, and the next level up literally is to link food projects, food sovereignty programs to the water scarcity. We've drilled the boreholes all over, but I'm not too sure that we visited any of these remote places again to see what is happening to those communities. So that's another thing we need to look through. And lastly, I'm glad you raised this new question of the interfaith work. Arya Samaj needs to assist the Hindu community to actually begin to build bridges within the Hindu community, but within the Indian community and beyond that. Because the Rainbow Nation is just a myth in this country. It's not a reality. And the reality will only be forged if we begin to find our commonalities. And so we need to begin to share the values of the Vedas and bring the interfaith unity as a reality. So we need to start that kind of program. So in terms of the future, we've got a number of ideas, and I think in the Centenary Committee, there's been these discussions. We need to look at how we end gender-based violence in keeping with the promotion of the equality of women, and ensure that the scourge on society that arises from the excesses in alcohol, drugs, and bullying is tackled. It's not enough to just train women priests. It's time to actually say, broadly in the community, that same respect needs to be practiced that the Vedas preach about. In terms of climate justice, we need to look at how we make the world noble through that. In terms of being faithful to the country where we earn our wealth, which is one of the things that we put down for the centenary, we need to look at how we also uphold the rule of law and support that. Then thank you, Kirun Bhai, for an excellent overview, in-depth overview on professionalizing the Vedic priesthood, because you're looking at where we take things to the next level up. And then, we've got the Yajak program that has been started, and that is about taking Vedic values to the community to build the practice of the Vedic way of life. So if the future is planned on this foundation, then we will be able to look beyond and above all of the things that we need to do. We'll be able to apply the knowledge contained, and Kirun Bhai spoke a lot about the knowledge today. We will be able to apply the knowledge contained in the Vedas according to the special needs of our community or of the circumstances of a particular time. And we leave our successes with something they can do. Of course, knowledge and truth are without end. This is something that came up during the course of the year where we were talking. Arya Samaj in South Africa was very determined to create a path for everybody, and for liberation and for knowledge. And of course, the path of liberation is through knowledge. If that can be shared with people, then, just by example, then we get going. Our past in South Africa has epochs to it. 1860 to 1910 was one epoch. Then 1911 to 1948 was another epoch. 1949 to 1990 was another period. A number of people call this the golden era in the Arya Samaj. And 1990 to present is yet another era. We've confronted caste, we've confronted the narrow forms of ritualism, and we are now confronting also the old racial boundaries. Arya Samaj is liberated from dogma. It thinks beyond the confines of gender and social divides. And so the struggles of the Arya Samaj to produce a Hinduism that is liberatory is something that we hold as our legacy. And we're going to hand over that legacy to the next generation. So with that, I'm hoping that the Arya Samaj leadership is able to take things through. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending, for indulging us with a little bit of extra time today. Our next series of lectures, please, there will be 12 lectures next year. And it will be under the normal bits of themes that we looked at, the sanskars, what does it mean to be a member of the Arya Samaj, as well as, navigating the present. And we've prepared 12 lectures, so watch out for the announcements. It will be released shortly to everybody. And I think I want to thank everybody for coming through and dealing with things. Our next meeting will commence, our next year's series, the 2026 series will commence on the 21st of January next year. So thank you very much to everybody. Reshma ji, could I hand over to you? Or Kiran bhai, do you want to say something?
No. Thank you, Karuna. Thank you to everybody. And have a pleasant year end for everyone that is part of this. Thank you. Namaste.
Om Dev ShantirantarikshamShanti Prithivi Shantarapah Shantir Oshadhayah Shanti Vanaspatayah Shantir Vishvedevaah Shantir Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Sama Shantiredhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Namaste.
Namaste to all.